In this section, we're going to talk about what we must do first in our efforts to parent traumatized children. And one of the things that we are looking to do is to create what we call an optimal living environment. An optimal living environment is one that is characterized by being relatively optimistic in general. It's purpose-driven. In other words, it's not just a series of tasks we do things, but we're doing everything for a purpose. The purpose might be a relationship that you want to establish that's going to be a lifelong relationship. I've seen families have purpose around serving their community, or having purpose around even animal rescue. You don't know what the purpose is going to be, but a lot of the environment will function better if there's a purpose that makes tasks have more relevant meaning. That the environment is, first of all, the parents in the environment or the adults in the environment are self-aware, and they use that self-awareness to monitor their own behavior, emotion, and thinking, and they tend to not discipline or confront children when they aren't able to manage themselves well. Additionally, they have goals that inspire them, personally and professionally in their life. They tend to be action takers rather than procrastinators. They tend to pay attention to the energy in the environment. They tend to look for wisdom out of experiences. In other words, it's not just a bad experience, it's an opportunity to learn something from that experience. They have faith, and I'm not talking religiously here, but they have faith in their ability to act that will generate outcomes that they want. They're able to love others, they attach and attune to others, and they connect with the spiritual or universal. So an optimal living environment has these characteristics, and these are the characteristics that will set the stage for a child who has a trauma history of trauma, toxic stress, and adversity to move through that and to recover. Now, it will take as long as it takes, but if with this environment, it's going to be a much more brief process if this is what the environment is. Earlier, I introduced the Center for the Developing Child out of Harvard, and they have a very nice little video for this. And so I'd like you to watch it as part of our presentation, because it really talks about how they've made some shifts. When, for about 40 years, they were some of the primary drivers for behavior management of children, to manage children, to discipline children. And they had and about 15 years ago, as the sciences continued to develop, they've made a total shift in their approach to dealing with this. And this video is narrated by Dr. Jack Shetoff, and it's excellent, and I think you'll really, really enjoy it. So here we go.
The social challenges that face modern societies, whether it's the ability to work productively, to be a good citizen, stay healthy, have their roots in early health and development. A strong foundation in early childhood results in much better and more effective development later. A weak foundation really puts us behind. The most important thing children need to thrive is to live in an environment of relationships that begins in their family, but also extends out to include adults who aren't family members in child care centers and other programs. What children need is for that entire environment of relationships to be invested in their healthy development. We've shown from decades of testing interventions that we can improve outcomes. But the magnitude of those impacts is not good enough. Science is now available to help us think about what we might do that would have a bigger impact than the best of what we've done before. So we began to ask, what could we be doing differently? What could we do to be smarter? Children who are at the greatest risk for the poorest outcomes in learning and health and behavior are children who experience a pileup, a cumulative burden of one after another of risk factors. And then the burden is more than any child could be expected to overcome. So we began to focus on the development of the adults. What could we be doing to strengthen the capacity of everyone who interacts with children? This led us to think about the kinds of skills you need to deal with adversity. These skills of focusing attention, planning, monitoring, delaying gratification, being able to solve problems, being able to work in teams, executive function, and self-regulation. They're also the kind of skills you need to create a well-regulated home and school environment in which healthy development and learning can take place. And then brain science started to tell us that differences in those skills start to develop in infancy based on the environment kids live in. So how do those skills get built? Well, if you don't develop them early, how do you develop them later? Actually, you can build them later because the period of flexibility and plasticity for this part of the brain doesn't fully mature until age 25 to 30. And then the light bulb went on. The reason we're not getting a bigger impact is not because we don't know about how to influence development, but because we're giving information and advice to people who we need to do active skill building with. Skill building by coaching, by training, by practice, but we're not doing that. So we now have developed this theory of change that says we need to focus on the development of the adults who are important in kids' lives.
So try this.
How does that work?
That's a new idea. Buen trabajo.
We need to focus on their skills, their needs, in order for them to be better, more effective parents, in order for them to be better prepared to be employable, which would enhance the economic stability of the family, which is also good for children. Second of all, we looked at many people in preschool programs and childcare centers. And we said, what are we doing to build those skills in the providers? They need skill building as well. And also the community can help to build and reinforce the capacities that parents need. And the community also includes programs in which the people who work in the programs have sufficient skills. Third of all, what are the major sources of toxic stress in this community, and how can we reduce them? Moving it up to a policy level, how are our policies strengthening communities' abilities to reduce sources of toxic stress and caregivers' abilities to provide what kids need? The development of our human capital is our future. The development of a productive workforce is our future. The development of a healthy population is our future. This kind of future orientation is critical for healthy society. It's critical for a thriving business. It's critical for a successful environment of relationships to raise children. It's all about being able to plan for the future, to have a future. And that's why this is so important.
So now that you've seen this video and you understand the concept that the adults have to be the ones to be able to manage themselves to improve child outcomes, what does that really mean? Is that we that are going to be raising traumatized children, either as a blended family, a foster parent, or an adoptive parent, we have to be actively involved in our own personal daily growth. What are we doing every day to strengthen our own ability to be self-regulated, to be self-aware, to be courageous, to be willing to tolerate the difficulties as they arise? How do we see the child's behavior with the lens of compassion? and how do we operate with our own personal integrity in our daily lives. Next, we have to kind of free ourselves from our addiction to our own self. We have a way of thinking and being with people, and we really want a child brought into our environment to think and feel about people the way we do. That's unrealistic. It's a burden to put on a child's shoulders, particularly when you're dealing with a dysregulated child. So what we ask is you need to step away from you depending on your assumptions and your ideas, and really move into an area where your nervous system is well balanced so that you can be an effective problem solver. So you can, and again, it's not to fix an annoying behavior, it is how do I orchestrate an environment that will make the behavior that I want be likely. If you wait till you get the bad behavior, you haven't done the groundwork yet. You want every interaction designed to create integration of the brain. In other words, you want everything that you do in your environment to encourage people to be at the top of the ladder. You want to learn to recognize their sensitivities. In other words, instead of you saying they have to do it the way you want it done, you look at what you notice in them and you design interactions with them to allow them to grow into what you want. And you avoid poking their sore spots or their tender spots. You help those with large or painful sore spots. You must focus on helping them feel connected, safe, accepted, and respected by you. That's a difficult task. Here is a child in your home. You've told them not to touch this thing for 10 or 12 times. They have now knocked it off the shelf. It's incredibly expensive, or it's a family heirloom. It's now destroyed. And of course, we want to blame the child for that. The reality is that we were asking them to perform in a way that is not really very likely to happen, and then we're mad at them when they don't. The real culprit there is that the adult did not change the environment, did not put the thing away, did not put it out of reach. And so the adult didn't want to change the environment, and they got an outcome they didn't want, and now it's somebody else's fault. That is problematic. So again, it's about don't be poking people's tender spots all the time. To help those trying to avoid real or perceived threat, which we have children that if they hear a voice that's loud, to them it triggers a response that's bad and people are going to hurt you. So if you have that kind of response, you have to make sure that you're paying attention to that. And even though you don't mean it to be a threat, if you're talking in a loud voice for a child that's sensitized that way, it's painful for them and they're going to shut down or they're going to get angry and aggressive. And you don't even know where that came from. So it's being able to be self-aware and to avoid what's real or perceived threats on the part of the child. To help people heal from the pain and distress and fear associated with their sore spots, you have to help them find competence and value in themselves. So this is, again, requires us to pay attention, to focus our attention on the child, and to really spend some time. A lot of times adults don't give children attention until the child is misbehaved or if they're doing some fun task with the child. The reality is, if you're going to help stabilize a traumatized child, they need you to pay more attention to the positive things that they do or the things that they fail to do that are negative than they do the rule breaks. And if you're finding you're only paying attention to the rule breaks, you aren't managing yourself very well. If that seems like a strange concept for you, let me recommend a book for you, which is excellent. Howard Glasser wrote this program called The Nurtured Heart. And it really is to help teachers and adults in any environment learn to pay attention to and comment on and reinforce, and underscore the confidence of a child. And that's what they need. If every time there's an interaction, it's because there's some problem or some irritation on the part of the adult, that environment is not safe. So what do we do? What do you need to be aware of in others that have histories of trauma, toxic stress, and adversity? Because they are things that are very clear and they're very pronounced and they're quite common. Does everybody have all of these? No, but these are quite common. So some of the attributes we're going to see in people with histories of adversity is that they're going to have less ability to process chunks of information. Where you're used to telling somebody something and having them be able to digest it, you may have to learn to adjust and only give a little piece and let it be digested, a little piece and let it be digested, and a little piece and have that be digested before you really are going to get any movement on that. Well, people want it to be easy. They just want to say it, have it be absorbed, and move on. But that's not going to work for children with these kinds of histories. You're going to have to break it up into smaller pieces that they can manage. Make sure that before you open your mouth to talk to a child that you're at the top of the ladder or you're in Bruce Banner mode. If you have any green in your system at all, if you're feeling at all hulkish, you shouldn't talk. All exchanges with traumatized children should be in a regulated state. Make sure that you can stay in Bruce Banner or at the top of the ladder no matter what others are saying or doing. And that takes a lot of practice, and it's not easy. I'm not saying it is, but it is required if you are going to parent traumatized children. Realize that no one can solve problems well in the Hulk mode. You don't, I don't, nobody does. In order to solve a problem and make a plan that we can follow, we have to be intentional, which means we have to be at the top of the ladder or we have to be in Bruce Banner mode. I, like you, have made many decisions when in the midst of emotions. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm really serious about it. But when my emotion changes, so does my commitment to that decision. Just like you do. If you want a child to make a decision and be able to follow through on it, then you and they have to be able to stay at the top of the ladder, because that's the only place that you can do that in. Be brief, be clear, and give many vivid descriptions of examples of people doing something. So think it through, say it in as few words as possible, give many vivid examples of how people succeed. So if I was going to be talking about, I wouldn't use examples from your own children with foster or adopted kids, but I would use examples of what you've seen what other parents have shared with you about what their kids did. So let's say that the goal is to make the bed. You want to be able to describe go make your bed doesn't mean anything to a traumatized child. You're assuming that because you know what you mean by that they will know what you mean by that. That's not true. You have to be very clear, and you're probably going to have to show them. This is the process of making this happen. And then talk about how other people have benefited as they've been able to do this. Make sure that you include in there what some of the common challenges are. What's a common challenge? Well, if you don't make your bed every day, number one, you can't ask a child to do that. And why don't you make your bed? Well, I get up late, I don't plan it, I don't make time for it, it's not that important to me, I'm an adult, I can leave my room as messy as I want. And yet you expect the child to make their bed. That's unworkable. We think of that as hypocrisy, but that's incredibly stressful on an already aroused nervous system. So again, make sure that you are identifying the challenge. What we do is we make our bed every day. But sometimes things pop up, like sometimes we sleep in, or we don't hear the alarm, or the power's gone off and we're an hour late. And those times, everybody knows we're not going to make the bed, and that's okay. You want to give them situations so they know, well, when is it okay and when isn't it okay? And we do that through really vivid examples. You also want to understand that if they are not at the top of the ladder, they cannot engage in logic and reason. I want you to think about this. How successful would you be trying to have a logic conversation with the Hulk or the mean kitty? You wouldn't. You can't get logic out of that system. So what do we see all the time is parents that are overwhelmed themselves trying to get a kid to think logically. And you'll hear questions like this. And you realize that it has nothing to do with the kid. The parent is distressed at this point. Why did you hit your brother Johnny? Well, because I did. No, tell me why. Well, now you're asking logic and reason out of basically a Hulk behavior. You're not going to get a satisfying answer because there isn't a satisfying answer. They did not do it with any malice. They did not do it with forethought. It was not something that got up in the middle of the night and planned out. It is a reactive behavior. Stop trying to get logic and reason out of people's reactive behaviors. You have to focus on the environment and its qualities more than emotions and behavior. That becomes incredibly important. You have to focus on the quality of the environment, not the behavior that you're finding annoying, not the emotions you're finding annoying, but what's going on in the environment that makes this stuff continue on, and what can we do in the environment to make it less and less often that we're seeing those things. Another one that's really important to understand is anybody that has had a trauma history, repetitive adversity, or toxic stress are not going to handle a lot of demand at any one time. So you want to give them one thing to do. So you would never tell a traumatized child to go clean up your room. You would tell them, please go put your brown shoes in your closet. Well, parents say, oh man, that's too much work. I don't want to do that. Well, the answer is if you want the child to do these things, you need to be precise. And the moment you give a child a list, particularly a traumatized child, you lose them. Now, why would you be surprised about that? How many of you have family members that keep a list for you to do things, and you see the list and you kind of go, ah, and you just feel overwhelmed by that? Or, you have a teacher in school that gives out this, 10 items that need to be done, and you're feeling overwhelmed and you just freeze up and you can't do it. Why would we do that to somebody else? Because it requires less of us. No lists of multiple items should be given to any traumatized child. You want to give them one very clear thing to do at a time. And what I hear over and over, well, that takes a lot of time. It's not very convenient. I'm tied up with this way too long. Yes, all of that is true, but that's what the job is. You have to be organized. You have to be planful. We all have to develop and maintain a faith if we create the right environment that people's behavior will adapt and we'll see more and more increasingly of the behavior that we need, or that would help them be successful and happy. Be predictable, be routine, be reliable, be transparent. Always follow up on requests, questions, suggestions, and feedback. I am often surprised when we want the kids to feel safe, and they feel safe enough to give some feedback to the adult, but the feedback is relatively negative to the adult, and now the adult reacts negatively, which tells the child that you were never really safe, don't ever do that again. If you are going to parent a traumatized child, it requires incredible focus and your ability to be an adult and stay at the top of the ladder. It's what it requires of me if I'm going to do that, and it's just that there's no way around it. If you want to be successful at this, that's what it requires.